Today we have with us Donavon McClure. Donavon is a Stakeholder Relations Field Representative to the KenuckyWired Project as a member of the NGKIH Design Build LLC. Prior to joining the DB LLC, Donavon served as a member of the Kentucky State Treasurer Allison Ball's executive staff, providing advanced work for all 120 counties and all 50 states. Mr. McClure is a graduate of the Union College as a Rogers Scholar, where he earned a degree in history and political science. During his time at Union, Donavon served in various student organizations along with being a member of the men's soccer team, both as a player and a staff member. While attending college, Donavon also served as summer intern in Washington, D.C. for United States Majority Leader Senator Mitch McConnell. Being a lifelong Kentuckian, Donavon McClure truly understands the impact the KenuckyWired Project has on the Commonwealth, both economically and in education. Donavon.
Thank you, Judge Johnson, for that kind introduction. Welcome, everyone, this morning. Thank you all so much for having me. Again, that was a very kind introduction, but today I want to talk to you all about the KenuckyWired Project. I will apologize, some of you have heard this joke before, but how many in this room, just a show of hands, have heard of NG-KIH DB LLC before today? Just a show of hands. Okay, that's generally what I see. I'll apologize immediately for that. That's what happens whenever you put too many engineers in a room and tell them to come up with the name of the project. So today we're going to talk about the KenuckyWired Project. As the judge mentioned, I'm a member of the design build team, as a member of the construction team, as an employee of LEDCOR. So whenever we talk about the NG-KIH DB LLC, that is actually the original name of this project. This project was announced back in 2015 at the time of Governor Steve Beshear's office and Congressman Howard Rogers of the 5th Congressional District, and this project was announced at the SOAR Summit in Pikeville, Kentucky. But its original name was actually Next Generation Kentucky Information Highway, which is what the NG-KIH stands for, and now we refer to ourselves as KenuckyWired Design Build LLC, just for the fact that it's actually much simpler and it's a lot easier. So throughout the course of the presentation today, I will refer to the project as the KenuckyWired Project. So what the KenuckyWired Project is we are installing fiber optic cable in all 120 counties. For those of you that were like me before I joined the project and didn't know what fiber optic was, it is actually glass wire that once connected will have light travel through it, and it will give you high-end connectivity to be able to provide for internet and telephone services. So, as I mentioned, this project is going into all 120 counties, including your all's area here in western Kentucky. And there's been a lot of progress on the project, and some of that I hope to be able to talk to you all about today as we go throughout. Some of the interesting things to know about the project: there are various organizations that are involved in this project. This project is what they call a P3 project. So the Commonwealth of Kentucky owns this infrastructure. If you notice, the KenuckyWired Infrastructure Company Incorporated is a nonprofit. The Commonwealth of Kentucky actually enacted an authority that is called the Kentucky Communications Network Authority that will oversee this policy and infrastructure throughout the Commonwealth of Kentucky, as well as being able to subcontract and award contracts on this project. So beneath that, you will see the KenuckyWired Operations Company LLC, which is the for-profit that was created along with the McCrary Group and the different bondholders on this project to be able to issue the bonds and also be able to sell the other half of the fiber that would be used for last mile projects. So whenever I mention last mile projects, my first slide mentions that we are building the middle mile project. And what the middle mile project means is that we are laying the backbone of fiber throughout the Commonwealth to government services, and from there the state will actually have half of the wires that are in our cables going to those sites of government services, and then the other half of those strands of fiber or glass wires will actually be available to be sold or leased to internet service providers that have partnered with county and community leaders like yourselves to be able to provide fiber to the home or fiber to the business, what we call last mile projects. So again, we're currently constructing the middle mile, and once the middle mile has been completed, counties and communities will have the unique opportunity of being able to access this through a partnership with the internet service providers. So, as I mentioned, this is a P3 project. Not only is this a P3 project, but it's the first and largest P3 project in all of North America. We are running over 3,400 miles of fiber optic cable throughout the Commonwealth into all 120 counties. And the original estimation on this project is that 85% of the fiber optic would go on existing telephone poles, and then carrying around 15% of the project to be run underground through conduit. Since the project has been started back in 2015, as many of you are aware, the office of governor was actually changed just a few months shortly after that to now Governor Matt Bevin's office. Whenever Governor Bevin came into office, his administration took a very hard look at this project to see if it was worth the money that has been put into this project. As you all may be aware, this project is over $330 million. Of that over $330 million, around $30 million of those dollars were appropriated from the General Assembly, and around $23.4 million were funds that were provided from the ARC, or the Appalachian Regional Commission, so primarily towards eastern and southeastern Kentucky, where I'm originally from. And then the remaining of that balance for this project was actually through various bondholders, along with the McCrary Group being one of the largest of those holders. But as I mentioned, we're the largest P3 project, telecom project in North America right now. And this project will actually span over 3,400 miles, which if you were to straighten this wire out, if you were to connect all of our wires together and straighten it out, it would be further than if you had ran it from Seattle, Washington, all the way to Miami, Florida. So that's truly how long this project is, or as massive as this project is, as we're running throughout the Commonwealth. So, as I mentioned, it going into all 120 counties. For the government-to-government services for your counties, think of your county clerk's office, think of your county PVA office, think of your all's health and family services, along with the state universities and some of the community colleges throughout the state are actually going to be some of the jump-off points for this project, where the wires will be connected and be able to be amplified to be able to carry that signal and high connectivity to all 120 counties. So when is KenuckyWired? A big question I get is, when is it coming? For your all's area, KenuckyWired is actually happening as we speak. There has actually been a plethora of updates and progress that we've been able to make on the project since the last time you all were given a presentation here at GRADD. We have currently around 60 to 80 different construction crews that work throughout the Commonwealth, 5 to 7 days a week, that are currently laying this fiber. I was telling some of the gentlemen this morning whenever I arrived that I was in Metcalfe County earlier this week, and my truck had actually broke down on my way home. I was with a construction crew that was actually hanging some of this fiber in that area, which is what we in Ring 3 in central Kentucky. And I'll talk a little bit more about the rings here momentarily. But so this is what some of our crews look like. As I mentioned, we are hanging this fiber on existing telephone poles. Around 90% or 2,900 miles of this project will be aerial, and only about 10% or around 500 miles of the entire state's project will be run underground to those government-to-government services. And the majority of the project will actually be using right-of-ways and general public right-of-ways to be able to have this. If it is going underground, our crews are boring that conduit, and so typically if we are in an area that has to run underground fiber, it's as if we were never there from the process that they use. And so some of these pictures you can actually see on the top left, that is a crew that appears to be boring some underground fiber. And then also, if you look at the bottom center picture, that is actually a photo of one of our huts that we're establishing or building at one of the community colleges in the state. So as I mentioned, there's around 60 to 80 different crews that are working throughout the state for this project. Here in your all's area, you all fall on the backbone of what we call Ring 4. And so you all have both the KenuckyWired DB LLC, which is a combination of Black & Beach, who is the main engineering company on this project, and then LegCorp, who is the main construction company on this project, and also was awarded the maintenance contract for the 30 years of this infrastructure. So it may be that you all are seeing crews in your all's areas, because we do have crews, like I mentioned, throughout the entire state. So we have crews currently here in Western Kentucky that are working to lay this fiber and lay these strands of fiber across the Commonwealth, and then also be able to hook them onto that backbone. So you may be able to see some of the crews with the logo that we carry, KenuckyWired. If any of you all parked outside in the visitor parking today, you more than likely had seen the logo on my truck whenever I pulled in. But there's also various subcontractors that have been on the project, and it's been tremendous effort from local telephone companies and co-ops that have been able to help partner on this project, along with the various construction crews that have helped us along the way. So it may be crews that you all are seeing. I was in Adair County yesterday giving a presentation to their Chamber of Commerce, and Duo Broadband, which is a company in that area, is actually connecting our fibers to their fiber. And so that's something that's also interesting about this project, is with the various communities throughout the state of Kentucky that do have existing fiber infrastructures, the state was able to negotiate with those communities whether or not their infrastructure will be hooked on to our backbone or not. So it may be the fact that their fiber is actually being connected to ours, which expands on their infrastructure that they have in place. So, but as I mentioned, we have crews that are working 5 to 7 days a week. So this can be some of the crews that you all may see, or some of the images that you all may see traveling through, some of the roads that you all have in the county, or just throughout the Commonwealth. So when the construction is coming through, there's multiple phases that go into the construction. Right now, it's around 3 to 4 phases of the project for what our construction crews do. Whenever they first come into a community, they do what they call make-ready work, and so they'll come in and survey the poles. Whenever this project was originally announced back in 2015, as I mentioned, the Bevan administration in 2016 took a hard look at this, but the project had already been contracted to the design build team, and so during that time our crews were actually beginning the engineering process, or being able to map out what these routes would be and where we would be going into counties and being able to use the existing poles. So a lot of the make-ready work has already been completed throughout all 120 counties, and typically once we are able to do that, crews will typically take anywhere from 2 to 4 visits to be able to come and put the strand on the poles, and then also be able to hang that fiber. And then once that fiber is on that strand, they will actually take a very small wire and do what they call lashing, and it will just interweave that wire to that strand and that backbone to be able to make it a secure line on that telephone pole. So, but like I mentioned, that's typically in an area right now, especially here in Western Kentucky, as we've progressed on the project and have been able to have completions in different rings. You more than likely, if you all are seeing crews in your area, they would be laying either strand or actually laying the fiber on those poles currently. So part of the initial site visits have already been conducted, as well as being able to have that survey. We do have an 888 number that individuals or community members can call if there's any questions or concerns about the project. I know that me and Ms. Holly Scoville, who presented to you all a couple of years ago, are actually the members that will handle those calls. And as Ms. Scoville had mentioned to you all, we typically try to have those calls returned within 2 hours. So we want to be as efficient as possible in making sure that we're able to get the concerns addressed that community members have about the project, and also be able to mitigate any sort of delays that they might have. So as I mentioned, right now we're pretty much in construction phases 3 and 4 as far as being able to actually build the project. The engineering work, for the most part, has been completed during that interim period of 2016 and 2017, and so our crews are working vigorously to be able to have this fiber hung and also dug throughout the Commonwealth. So ultimately this project will be completed no later than the end of October of 2020. And so I know that as the life of this project, there have been a lot of lessons that they've had to learn as they go along. Definitely a project of this size has certainly been able to see that, and as they've progressed, they've been able to learn things that they are able to do more efficiently that maybe at the first part of the project they did not do so. But at this point in time, our crews are typically around phases 3 and 4, and after the fiber has been hung, whenever that wire is connected to each other, that is what they call splicing, and we'll have crews that will go back after that has been hung to be able to do that. My apologies. More than likely it's a crew somewhere. My apologies for that. But as I mentioned, we have crews that are working throughout, so you'll be seeing them either building or even having the craftsmen coming back to those wires to be able to splice and connect it together to be able to connect all 120 counties. So I mentioned the rings earlier in the project, and whenever I said these are going to government services, if you notice, these are 6 different rings throughout the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Rings 1A and what is known as the unofficial golden triangle of the project, from Lexington to Louisville to the Cincinnati area, from Lexington to Pulaski County and Somerset, all the way over to Prestonsburg up to Ashland, back to Lexington is Ring 1B. And Ring 2, where I'm actually originally from, in London, Kentucky, is southeastern Kentucky. Ring 3 in central Kentucky, Ring 5 in northeastern Kentucky, and then Ring 4 where you all fall under here in western Kentucky. So, as I mentioned, this is going to approximately 1,100 different sites, and also it will be over 3,400 miles of fiber optic cable that will be laid throughout the Commonwealth. And so, why KenuckyWired? A big part of the project and a big anticipation of this project and a big need of this project is the promotion of economic development as communities that don't have fiber infrastructures in place. This will allow an opportunity for those underserviced areas to have an opportunity to promote economic development, not only in their area, but also their region, from being able to see an increase in potentially work from home jobs that are being able to be given to communities that weren't there previously. Also being able to enhance in education, research capabilities, improving government service delivery where this is going to government sites. This should be able to give those sites a higher quality of service and a much faster service of high-speed connectivity. As far as enhancing public safety to the 911 and sheriff's offices that will be connected along with this, being able to enhance their services that they're providing, improving healthcare as far as telemedicine advancements being a potential benefit of the project, and then ultimately the libraries in the K through 12 schools are currently having the fiber ran up to the building, and the anticipation is that they are on what they call an E-rated contract currently, and so the Commonwealth and KCNA will go back and try to negotiate for those sites at a later date and time, but the fiber is actually still being ran up to the building. It's just not being installed throughout those schools and libraries. But there's also the anticipated benefit of it enhancing the connectivity for libraries and communities as a whole, and then also creating a sustainable, scalable network for future growth. As I mentioned, this fiber, typically on these strands, the average strand on this project is 288 wires. So the Commonwealth of Kentucky will actually only use half of those wires, as I mentioned, for those government-to-government services, leaving 144 wires for communities and counties to be able to look at of ways of being able to use that resource for last mile options or fiber to the home or fiber to the business. And so this will also give Kentucky the opportunity to be the first telecom project in the United States to have fiber in all 120 counties, as it's the largest P3 project throughout the United States. And it'll also give Kentucky the #1 in the United States for high-speed internet access. When this project was originally announced, Kentucky actually fell around 47th to 49th in the country for high-speed internet access. So these are some of the anticipated benefits of this. Now, as I mentioned, there's been a lot of progress that has happened on this project since probably the last time a presentation was given to your all's ad board. And actually, more progress has been made since I was actually able to update this PowerPoint. So a reason to celebrate KenuckyWired, as of today, we've completed over 1,800 of the 3,400 miles that are to be completed on this project. And so at the beginning of the summer, Governor Matt Bevin, along with Congressman Hal Rogers at the Kentucky County Judge Executives Conference, had actually announced the completion of Ring 1A from Lexington to Louisville to the Cincinnati area, but also from Lexington to Somerset, which was a portion of Ring 1B. Back at the beginning of September at the 2019 SOAR Summit, again, Governor Matt Bevin and Congressman Hal Rogers had actually announced the completion of Ring 1B and Ring 2 in eastern and southeastern Kentucky. And so right now, of those 60 to 80 crews that we have throughout the Commonwealth, those crews are primarily located between Rings 5, Rings 3, and then also here in Ring 4, being able to complete those other rings as well, so that way the entire network will be connected and live no later than October of 2020. And so for your all's area, specifically in the Daviess County area, you all have a third-party provider that is on this project that is helping to lay some of the fiber or some of the fiber exchange. And if you are a county that has sort of the MuniNet area coverage, they are a third party that is also helping in the construction on this in Ring 4. And then also Gibson Electric is one of the third parties to also be helping in this region as well. So, but as I mentioned, your all's region in Ring 4 is anticipated to be completed no later than October of 2020, which is also the completion of the project in its entirety. So how can you help with Kentucky Wired? For those of you that have heard these presentations in the past, it's the same call to order as it has been in the past. Be able to share the good word about the project, letting people know. It's great that you all have shown up this morning and taken time out of your all's busy schedules to be able to hear about the progress that we've made on this project. But if the information that I've given you today stays in this room, then I'm in the exact same situation that I was in whenever Ms. Scoville brought me on the project at the end of March. So being able to share that good word to your community members, letting your community leaders and members know, hey, we are going to be able to see more construction crews here in western Kentucky now that construction has been completed in eastern and southeastern Kentucky. And also letting them know that as you all being community leaders, being able to understand what your options are for last mile expansion and what opportunities are out there and available for that. And then lastly, being able to share the 888 number that I mentioned earlier, as far as if there are any concerns or questions about the project. I know typically a lot of times I'll get, when can I get to my address? When can I get to my home? So there is a lot of interest out there throughout the Commonwealth for those last mile projects. Or our website, which I will give to you all here, is the KenuckyWiredProject.com. And on that website is the DB LLC's website. And so it gives you some further information on the construction side of the project, along with the engineering and some of the staff spotlight, and also answers a number of questions on the project that are some usual questions that we get. And again, that's our 888 number. And again, we try to answer any sort of questions that if a caller calls into that, it will either come to myself or Ms. Scoville, and we will have that call returned in no later than 2 hours from receiving that call. So at this time, I know I've given you all a lot of information all at once in a short amount of time, but I would be happy to take any general questions that you all may have. And your all's ad district is actually in a very unique position where you all have GRADD already in place, and some of the proactive work that you all have been doing and throughout the course of this project to be able to look and see what is feasible and if it's going to be something that your all's GRADD is able to potentially hook onto, or what opportunities are out there here in eastern Kentucky in this portion of the state. And so, but if anybody has any general questions about the project as far as its progress, I'd be happy to take those. Yes, sir.
I have two questions. First question is, I think that I heard you say that approximately half of the fiber had been strung at this time. I think you gave a number of 15, 16, 1,800 in the...
Yes, sir. Around 1,800 miles of the project has actually been completed from construction.
Yeah. And so the other half is going to be done between now and October the 20th, October 2020?
Yes, sir. So as I mentioned, over 1,800 miles have been completed. But that's not to say if we are working, if I have a crew, if there's a crew in Adair County, that once Adair County is completed, that they're actually connected, that will actually be until the entire region will be completed. So we will have various crews working throughout the Commonwealth and specifically here in Western Kentucky. So while a crew may be in Union County working on laying some backbone, we could also have a crew, say, in Todd County also being able to work towards that.
I'm just kind of confused. I think it took 5 years to get that first half in, and they're going to get the last half in a year.
Well, I certainly understand that, and there was a lot of, as I mentioned, there was a lot of lessons that were learned along the project, and something that I didn't mention in the initial presentation is that it was actually, when the project was first announced, they had thought that everybody was going to be able to attach to these telephone poles, these existing poles, and that everybody was going to agree with it, which was, I mean, it was very, very ambitious for them and very eager and optimistic to be able to do that, or optimistic to be able to do that. But it actually took one pole company alone, took around 7 months just to get the pole agreement. So there was a period of time on the project, as I mentioned, that we were actually doing more of the engineering work to be able to map it out before we were actually able to begin the construction portion of the project once it was re-announced in September of 2016 under Governor Matt Bevin. So.
My second question is, how is this $300 million P3 project being funded?
Okay, so that's a great question. As I mentioned, the majority of the project is being funded through bondholders, such as the McClure Group that fall under the KenuckyWired Operations Company that I mentioned, or QWOC is the acronym for that. That was the largest portion of the project's funding. Around $30 million were appropriated from the general fund, or not the general fund, but from the General Assembly, excuse me. And then also around $23.4 million came from the Appalachian Regional Commission that, again, is primarily in eastern and central Kentucky counties. So that is where a large portion, that is where the funding for this project has come from.
So about $250 million of that $300 million is through bond.
Yes, and excuse me, it's actually over $300 million that is on the project. So I would say that it would be north of $250 million. But yes, a majority of that is actually from bondholders for the project. So, but thank you. Those are two great questions. Any other? Yes, sir.
Just kind of linking with the mayor. All right, so you guys are going to do in the next roughly year 1,600 miles of fiber with at least 3-year-old make-ready surveys?
And that would be the anticipation. As far as our crew, those are the deadlines that the DB LLC have agreed with the Commonwealth of Kentucky to have completed. I know I was actually in Louisville just a few months ago at the Governor's Local Issues Conference, and Deck Decker, who's the interim executive director of KCNA, or Kentucky Communications Network Authority, has actually anticipated that our crews will have Rings 5, which is just from Ashland back to the Cincinnati area, and then also Ring 3 from Somerset to Glasgow, from Glasgow back up to Louisville, having that portion of the project.
Yeah, no, I understand what you mean, but I mean,
having that completed by the end of this year alone. And so from there, that will leave Ring 4 to be completed. So
you're going to be opening up crews, and I get that, and I understand that part, but you're also looking at surveying that might be 3 to 5 years old.
Right.
And unfortunately, I mean, I've got experience on this half. I mean, I've hung a couple hundred miles of fiber myself.
Okay.
I mean, you guys are going to be sending crews into places in Western Kentucky. We have problems like ice storms.
Right.
Your pole conditions have changed.
Okay. And now I will say that our crews do work hand in hand. Whenever they have the pole agreements, they do try to work with utility companies. And part of my role is being a stakeholder relations field rep, going into counties and talking to the different utility companies to find out, you know, there's some counties that aren't 811. I know that we had the 811 law passed, and so that is actually being updated. But as far as telephone companies and electric companies and their poles, and being able to partner with those utilities, so that way if things have changed, being able to be a liaison between those companies and our construction crews, so that way they know if there has been a change to a pole condition, or if a pole has been deteriorated and a new pole's going in, or if there's been any sort of changes to that. So there is some fluidity as far as what those conditions and that make-ready work. But that is still the anticipation, is that they will have all 120 counties completed on this redundant network or partially redundant network. And so the rings form the backbone or sort of the interstate. And then if you notice, there are several wires or several strands that run into counties. Those are what we call laterals. And that will be running off of the backbone, and that is where a lot of times our third-party members or those local co-ops or telephone companies have helped out in the construction of that fiber. But that is a good question, sir. So, yes, sir.
When you talk about the middle mile or the backbone,
Yes, sir.
that's being paid for by $350 million, I guess. And we're talking about governments using it, community colleges using it. So who pays or how is the last mile financed, say, going to Rosine in Ohio County, or
Right.
Habit in Davis County, or Tywapity Bottoms in Hancock County? Because it's nice to have that
Right.
super highway down the middle of the state, but when
Right.
you got
Being
dirt
able-
roads or gravel roads going to it,
Right.
there's not much function. That's first part of the question. The second part of the question is that while government is going to use some of it, then private enterprise is going to also have access to how much of it roughly?
Okay, those are two very good questions, so I'm going to try to answer them part by
Well,
part.
let me finish.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry.
So private enterprise is going to have access, meaning that they're going to use, I'm assuming, fiber that's funded by the government, and they're going to be able to sell that to private individuals. They certainly will run the last mile out to where there are lots of folks. They won't run that last mile out to Rosine, Tywapity Bottoms, or Habit. So that leaves a really big gap. Has there been any talk about how that's going to be accomplished, how that's going to be financed?
Okay, so those are two great questions.
Well, that's about full.
Well, it was a two-part that expanded, so I'll try to see if I can answer. As far as the funding on those last mile projects, county and community leaders will partner with internet service providers. So the state will have the ownership of this infrastructure in its entirety. Of those, half of the infrastructure that would be either sold or leased to the internet service providers to be able to provide that last mile. So it's not, hey, I'm Internet B coming in, I'm going to go ahead and use this. That fiber will actually be sold or leased to internet service providers, or what we call ISPs, that have partnered with communities. Now, as far as the funding for those go, I know that there are some various different organizations. As far as USDA is actually a great organization. I know Hilda Legg does a great job going throughout the Commonwealth, being able to talk about the opportunities that they have available for last mile opportunities. If you're in eastern and southeastern Kentucky and you fall under the ARC counties, you will actually, there's some federal funding through that program for those
Who
counties.
gets the money that is received when you sell the?
Whenever you sell the fiber, to my understanding, KCNA or Quack has actually set up One Fiber, which is the company that will oversee as far as the selling or leasing of that fiber to be able to take that those monies in for the Commonwealth.
So
And
Commonwealth gets the money.
to my understanding, and that may be a question more so for Kentucky Communications Network Authority than it would be for the DB LLC, since we're building and design. We're the design and build of
Is
this
that money
project.
used to debt service the bond?
To mine, I wouldn't be able to answer that, unfortunately. I'm really sorry. I don't want to give you an answer that may not be true. But again, that might be a question to be able to give to the state. So,
Good luck with that.
so thank you though. Those were great questions. I'll be here till the end. So if anybody has any additional questions, or if you would like to be able to meet, I've got plenty of business cards. And so, but I just want to thank you all again very much for your time this morning and allowing me to give you all a little bit of an update of what we're doing on Kentucky Wired. Thank you.